to Tim Walz, who, just when you think no one's sitting at this table, neither she nor the big white blanket, can embarrass themselves any further, he does. She asks him, to her credit, about the carrying the weapons in war, which we know is a lie. He never served in war. He's been stealing valor for quite some time.
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on DEI, and we let them define what woke is. We got ourselves in this mess because we weren't bold enough to stand up and say, "You damn right we're proud of these policies. We're going to put them in, and we're going to execute them."
So, wait, you lost because you weren't woke enough?
In a no-holds-barred segment that felt more like a political prize fight than a commentary, Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly unleashed a scathing takedown of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz that left no room for ambiguity or recovery. Armed with signature sarcasm and Kelly's surgical precision, the duo delivered a masterclass in televised roasting, dismantling Walz's record with a combination of sharp wit and unrelenting scrutiny. From the outset, Gutfeld didn't waste time pulling punches. He dove headfirst into what he dubbed the Minnesota maze of mismanagement, calling out everything from Walz's erratic press conferences to his seemingly directionless leadership style. Kelly followed up with a detailed, almost forensic breakdown of failed policy after failed policy, painting a picture of governance that, in her words, confused performative optics with actual outcomes. The pair spared no detail, highlighting moments that were as cringeworthy as they were chaotic. Gutfeld mocked Walz's pandemic-era decision-making with barbed humor, likening it to throwing darts at a policy wheel blindfolded. Kelly, meanwhile, targeted the governor's public messaging, calling it a masterclass in contradiction and confusion. It wasn't just criticism, it was a demolition. Their takedown wasn't limited to individual decisions. It laid bare a broader pattern of leadership that, according to them, thrives on deflection and collapses under accountability. By the end of the segment, it was clear this wasn't a political jab, it was a precision strike. If Governor Walz had any plans for image rehabilitation or political redemption, Gutfeld and Kelly may have just cancelled them with a single broadcast. And, judging by the reaction, it's a moment that won't be forgotten anytime soon.
You said you carried weapons in war, but you've never deployed in a war zone. A campaign official of yours said you misspoke. Did you? Well, I'm proud, incredibly proud of my record. He keeps doing this. Equally proud of my service in the classroom. Did I mention I was a teacher and a coach, an assistant coach? Okay, whatever. But he's more stolen valor. In the classroom, I'm in the classroom. My record speaks for itself. It doesn't, actually. You've put a lot of lies into that record that you've been called out on by service personnel. You must clarify, as your campaign had tried to do, and now you appear to be distancing yourself from that clarification.
Gutfeld was already grinning before he even opened his mouth, a mischievous, knowing smirk that signaled someone, somewhere, was about to get verbally steamrolled. The grin had become something of a warning sign over the years. Brace yourself, because things are about to get ugly. And this time, the unfortunate soul in the crosshairs of Gutfeld's savage sarcasm and comedic cruelty was Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Walz, often described as affable, has now achieved something far more dubious. He's become the political embodiment of beige, not the chic, minimalist kind of beige either. The kind you slap on a rental wall because it offends no one and inspires absolutely nothing. Gutfeld wasted no time tearing into that mediocrity with the enthusiasm of a man handed a fresh target and a bottomless arsenal of punchlines. Tim Walz, Gutfeld began, his grin widening, is a man so allergic to bold decision-making, he makes lukewarm coffee look like a stimulant. The studio erupted in laughter, and that was just the opening salvo. What followed was a meticulous, merciless roaster comedic autopsy of a governorship that Gutfeld described as directionless, indecisive, and somehow still proud of it. But he didn't stop at style, he went for substance, too, mocking Walz's policy choices with the finesse of a stand-up comic who'd done his homework. From floundering pandemic responses to confusing public statements that sounded like they'd been written by a committee of sleep-deprived interns, Gutfeld laid it all out with a kind of flair that made the truth sting even more. Walz talks about leadership like it's a hypothetical exercise, Gutfeld quipped. He's the guy who'd hold a meeting to decide whether to hold another meeting. And just when you thought it couldn't get worse for the Minnesota governor, Megyn Kelly joined the fray with her own brand of brutal clarity, backing up the mockery with pointed facts and unrelenting critique. By the end of the segment, it was less a roast and more a political funeral with jokes. Walz had been dissected, dismissed, and discarded in under 10 minutes, left somewhere between a punchline and a cautionary tale. If Walz was hoping to quietly fly under the radar, Gutfeld just lit that radar on fire.
Here's two pieces of this that are really... I speak like they do. People are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about, and then he goes on to blame it on the school shootings. I guess he was upset about school shootings, so he lied. But stop saying you speak like we do. I speak like regular people. What kind of bullshit is that?
Greg Gutfeld leaned back in his chair like a man settling in for an all-you-can-eat buffet of political absurdity. His weapon of choice, not a fork or a knife, but something far more dangerous: sarcasm sharpened to a surgical edge. With that familiar gleam in his eye, Greg reached for his favorite rhetorical blade, already savoring the slow roast to come. The entree: Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, a man who, in Greg's words, wasn't merely a political figure, but something far more confounding. A full-time bureaucrat, a part-time logic dodger, and a hopeful graduate from the School of Governmental Gobbledygook. Calling him a leader, Greg mused with mock reverence, is like calling a traffic jam a transportation strategy. The audience chuckled, but he was just getting started. To Gutfeld, Walz's approach to governance was a comedy of contradictions. This is a guy whose idea of decisive leadership, he continued, is to issue a press release, cancel it an hour later, and then blame the media for taking it seriously in the first place. The timing of the punchline was perfect, delivered with the kind of deadpan precision that made it sting all the more. Gutfeld painted Walz not as a villain, but as something far more frustrating, a chronic overthinker who somehow still managed to underdeliver. Policies emerged like fog, slow, shapeless, and gone by morning. Direct answers were avoided with the skill of a man who had long ago made peace with confusion as a governing philosophy, and that was just the appetizer.
Then Walz also seemed to doubt the validity of the last election and future ones.
They've released analyses of election data out of Clark County, Nevada, that show some pretty convincing evidence of election tampering. So what can we do to make sure, A, that the midterms actually happen, and B, that they're free of fraud?
Yeah, this one's a clue. We saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more
Greg
difficult
didn't
for
need
women?
a crystal ball to predict Tim Walz's next move. No tarot cards, no tea leaves, just a basic grasp of how to sidestep responsibility while wearing the kind of smile usually reserved for ribbon cuttings and hollow promises. It's an art form at this point. And Walz, he's practically a virtuoso. If political cowardice had a brand ambassador, Greg quipped, Tim would be on the billboard front and center, grinning like he just cured world hunger with a task force and a strongly worded memo. You could almost picture it, Walz at the podium, holding a complimentary gift bag stuffed with excuses, politely requesting a raise for all his hard work, avoiding the hard work. Gutfeld delivered it with that knowing tone that said, "You've seen this movie before, and unfortunately, it keeps getting sequels."
Outpouring of love for his son and the relationship between a father and son in that moment was overwhelming too. Yes, even among Republicans. But he wants to dodge the responsibility for his lies, and he brings up his son to do it. He tried.
The greatest hits were on a loop in Greg's head, and every track was a classic if you like your politics wrapped in chaos and confusion. There was that unforgettable moment when Tim Walz attempted to explain his economic plan and somehow, with remarkable skill, managed to outline the plot of a low-budget disaster movie instead. Inflation, not his fault, just a natural occurrence, like rain or gravity, completely out of his hands. Rising unemployment, that was apparently one of those unsolvable cosmic riddles, right up there with black holes and missing socks. And the wave of small businesses shutting their doors at record speed, merely a seasonal trend. He implied nothing to see here, folks. Just a bunch of mom-and-pop shops closing faster than pop-up Halloween stores in November. Total coincidence. Greg couldn't help but marvel at it. You almost have to admire the commitment, he joked. It takes real effort to dodge that much responsibility while still managing to sound vaguely optimistic, like the captain of a sinking ship telling passengers the indoor pool just opened.